Brian and Tori. Obviously, these two are
messed up.
Horrible people. Yeah, very, very messed up. But they were kind of a crazy pair together. It's just kind of weird how sometimes these people find each other. Like, how does that even happen that you come together as two really messed up people who have this idea of wanting to kill people? But they fancy themselves as like movie critics. They're always watching movies. Everybody that was interviewed talked about how they were always filming themselves. They were always talking about how they were going to make a scary movie. They were going to be movie producers and things like that. They walk around school basically always filming themselves. This is in 2006. So it wasn't like they had cell phones with cameras a ton back then. I don't even remember if we had camera. Yeah, we had camera phones, but not great camera phones, but they were like video taping things. So they're always like trying to pretend that they're interviewing classmates, and they're doing like their own little interviews and things like that in classes, hallways. There was one of them interviewing Cassie in the hallway by her locker and things like that. So they're actually friends with Cassie and Matt. I mean, they're all kind of in the same group. They're always, like I said, talking about how they want to make their own horror film, what they would do, what it would be about, things like that. One odd thing about them was that they were really obsessed with school shooters, like the Columbine killers. They really idolized the Columbine killers because they said it was like they were the underdogs, and they finally got revenge on the people that were making their lives horrible. So they thought the Columbine killers were wonderful. So that's kind of a red flag for me.
It is a red flag.
That's horrible. Get better idols, as Bailey Sarian would say. So they also loved the movie Scream, which you can see some parallels. Yeah. And this is actually called The Scream Murder a lot, which we'll talk about a little bit as well later on. But Brian describes himself as being an outcast, which basically tells you why he idolized school shooters who got revenge on the people who were the outcasts got revenge on those people, basically.
He had a friend group of 3 people.
Yeah. Well, exactly. He did have friends. Yeah. I mean, and Cassie was friends with him, so it wasn't like he was a horrible outcast. She was nice to him, and Matt seemed nice to him. So I don't think he was like a loner. He obviously had some friends. Not the best friend in Tori, for sure. So back in August, they had actually called an older friend that was 18 to see if he would go to the pawn shop with them and buy some knives, because they wanted knives. They weren't old enough to purchase them, which doesn't really ring any like emergency bells for me, because maybe they just collected knives, and that doesn't mean that you're homicidal or anything. But they kind of had an obsession with weapons, which together with the list of their idols and things that they're already doing maybe sends some warnings. But they do pick out some knives at the local pawn shop. Tori gets 1 and Brian picks out 3. And those were actually the knives that they would later use in the murder.
All of
them? At least 2. Yeah. So after the murder, of course, they basically spend their time filming, and after the murder is no different. So they are literally recording themselves before the murder, after the murder, talking about the murder. So if you're going to commit a crime, definitely don't put it on film.
Yeah.
So after the murder, they leave Cassie's house, and they have a segment that's recorded at 11:30 p.m., which, if you think about how the time frame is there of Matt's mom picking him up around 11 p.m. and them leaving at 11:30, it didn't take them long.
They got straight to business.
They just went in and did their business and left. So a little bit after 11:30, Draper on this tape says, "I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not an effing joke." Obviously it doesn't say effing, but Tori says, "I'm shaking." And Brian said, "I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body. It just disappeared. Dude, I just killed Cassie." And so on this tape, Brian is actually stating, "I just killed Cassie." Why he didn't say we, I don't know. But I really think it was just because he's like an egomaniac. He wants so badly to kill somebody that I really think it was just all about him. He didn't care about Tori or anything.
I think you're right.
After the murder, they go back to Tori's house and they find a big sack where they put their costumes. Because, I mean, remember, they had full-on costumes for this. Black clothes, their masks and everything. It wasn't like they just accidentally showed up and something happened. This is a premeditated murder that they were prepared for a long time before. So they put everything in this sack, the costumes, the knives, with some alcohol as well. They go get matches and they drive up to a canyon to get rid of everything. So they end up trying to burn some of the evidence. They try to bury some of the other stuff. And they also leave the tapes there. So I don't understand, if you're going to go to all the work to record this, why would you just bury it and leave it there for people to find? So they could have definitely done something better with the evidence that would destroy it if they wanted to. But now Saturday, Matt still cannot get a hold of Cassie. And he's still worried. But he can't do much because his mom has the car. He's only 16. He's kind of at everyone else's mercy. Mm-hmm. He ends up staying the night at Tori's house that night. Isn't that crazy? Your eyes just went, Can you imagine staying the night at the kid's house who just killed your girlfriend the night before and you had no idea? Mm-hmm. And Tori, you are such a puke for having this guy over. It's crazy to me. So he actually asked Tori if they can go check on Cassie because he hasn't heard from her. He can't get a hold of her. He's still worrying. Mm-hmm. And Tori just says, "No, we can't go. I don't have enough gas and I don't have any money to get there." So night goes by. They end up staying the night, there at Tori's house. So why nobody else went to check on Cassie at this point? I was about to say, her mom or nothing? Her mom can't get a hold of her. I mean, these are some red flags that I would think that my parents... If that were you, you'd be there in 2 minutes. You're not answering me. Yeah, I would definitely not let a whole weekend go by. So now what we know now, according to reports, both boys, after leaving Cassie's, had gone directly back to their vehicle. They had dressed themselves in the black clothing, and they had actually gotten prepared right away for this. They went down the street and they got dressed and everything. So they never had any intention of going anywhere else but back to kill them. So they were the ones that obviously had cut the power to the house. They tried to lure Cassie and Matt down to the basement, and they really had the intention of attacking them both. Yeah, Matt, they were going to kill Matt too. Yeah, they're basically, they were more worried about Cassie. They wanted to kill her more, but they had stated in some of the videos that if Matt got in the way, that they would just kill him too. So they weren't worried about him being around. They had every intention of killing them both. So when it didn't work for them to lure them, they allegedly had turned the lights back on and just kind of waited for a little bit longer. So we also know that there were different knives used in the attack, which shows us that both boys were active in this murder. One didn't commit the murder while the other one just sat by and watched. They had actually previously attempted to do this at least 8 to 9 times by their own admission. So they had said in one of their videos that they had actually tried this 8 or 9 times already, and they were unsuccessful because the victims were never alone. And it said, like, every time we try, either their parents show up or somebody comes or they're not by themselves.
And they don't get caught?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
They actually don't find her until Sunday afternoon when her aunt and uncle return. So her aunt and uncle return around 1:15 that afternoon on Sunday. And the 13-year-old cousin goes in, and I'm thinking of this 13-year-old who probably gets along really well with her 16-year-old cousin, going in because she's probably really excited to see Cassie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking she runs in the house first to go see Cassie more than anything, right? And she's home to see her dogs and everything. Now, when she goes in, Cassie's body is lying in the living room, and she's the one that discovers it first. Yeah.
So...
And the scene was pretty horrendous. I mean, there was blood everywhere, and she had obviously been gone for a long time. So it was pretty horrible. They are questioned. Matt is definitely, like I said, implicated in it because he's the last one to have seen her. So obviously you're going to go with that first, right? It was pretty obvious that Matt didn't have a whole lot to do with it, but he didn't show a whole lot of emotion during the questioning, which is like, you never know really how people are going to react or how they should react. You can't really say, but that's one thing that they thought was a little bit odd. He doesn't show the emotion like they thought he should, but it ends up that's just him. He's just not like emotionless, but he was, basically in shock, I think, at this time. So they questioned the boys that were there as well, and they say, no, we went to a movie afterwards. We left the house. We weren't even around. And so they ask him, what movie did you go to? And he doesn't remember. He doesn't quite remember what movie he went to.
Who doesn't remember?
Brian. So they're questioning Brian. Doesn't really remember what movie it was. It's like, I don't know. I think it was a scary one. Doesn't know the name. They ask him, well, do you remember anything about the movie? What was it about? I don't really remember anything about it. I don't know what it was about. Well, who was in it? I don't really remember. I just remember it was boring and I wanted to leave. So he can't tell them anything about this movie, which if you're such a movie critic and you're so interested in making movies, you would think that you would notice things about the movies. So that definitely stands out as something that's suspicious, right? Also, the girl from the ticket booth, they question her to see if they were actually at the movies, and she knows Brian and Tori from school, and she said no, that they weren't here. So she knows for absolute certain that they weren't. So we obviously know they make videos all the time, right? September 21st was when the recordings of them actually planning the killings were happening. And September 22nd was when she was murdered. So on the 21st, just a few things of what was on the tapes. Draper is just a couple quotes from the tapes. He says, we're going for a high death count. So he's just like basically bragging about how they're going to kill people, but they're going to be the really best at it. They're going to do better than anyone else. And they're going to be so good at it. He's at one point bragging about how they're going to be so good at it that like FBI agents are going to want those videos to see like how the minds of serial killers actually work, because they're going to be like the best serial killers ever.
That's crazy. So
they have goals, but they are the wrong goals in life. They say, as an alibi, they say when they're questioned, no, we were at the movies. We went to the movies. So they definitely still use that as their defense, that they just went to the movies. And so not only are the cops a little bit suspicious, they're also looking at Matt. Obviously, he was the last one to see his girlfriend. Also, at one point, Brian Draper is also saying on the tape, we found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices. Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart and her friends. So they're at this point They know it's going to be Cassie. They know it's their friend, but we all have to make sacrifices.